The first thing we'd like you to do is say your name and where you're from, please.
George Papangellin, originally from San Jose, now in Fresno.
Okay, well, you know why we're here today. We're talking about your experience with FDF, and you started in San Jose when you were 14 years old? Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Started at the age of 14, joining a dance group there at St. Nicholas Greek Church. And a couple years later was our first venture to the FDF.
And how did you do that first year?
We came in second.
Out of how many?
Let's see. There were 3 groups in the senior group. So we came in second out of 3.
Very good. Very good. And then did you how long were you involved with FDF as a dancer?
As a dancer until 1986 or 87. Don't remember exactly what year I stopped one phase and moved into another phase. Everything kind of blended together.
Were you part of the management group, the dancers who helped manage FDF?
Yes. I was on the not the original board, but I was on the board. Let me come back to that one. I was on the board of trustees, first as the treasurer, and then vice president, and then took the office of president.
Oh wow! What was that role like? What did you do as on the board?
Well, obviously, treasurer, you're managing the financial affairs of the board, not necessarily of the annual event. As vice president, you step into the role of president or presiding officer of a meeting if the president is unable to attend. But the entire experience is one that I value, and I encourage anyone who is still involved in FDF as a volunteer in whatever capacity, to look forward to those higher positions of responsibility, because it's great teaching, and I didn't like that. Moving up through the ranks affords the person opportunities to learn new things. And in this day and age, to be involved in a movement such as the FDF, to learn how to write a budget, to learn how to coordinate an event, or contact suppliers of different things, or write an agenda, or actually preside over a meeting in a formal way with Robert's Rules of Order or what have you. Kids don't have opportunities like that, and FDF still gives you those opportunities, and that's what I appreciate most, having moved through those roles, was the opportunity to learn how to conduct meetings and how to conduct some form of business. Obviously, it wasn't a personal business, but it was a business nonetheless.
And kids don't learn that today
very
easily unless you college.
Right, and they're going to get a bachelor's, or they're going to get an MBA, and they're going to do internships, and they're going to read textbooks, attend webinars these days, and take down a lot of notes and learn how to put together an agenda, or to present a meeting and moderate a meeting or a discussion. But they're doing it in their mid-20s or maybe even later. With FDF, we were learning this as teens and early 20-year-olds, whether we had just graduated high school or not, or just into college or not. We were learning things that so many others didn't have an opportunity to.
What else were you learning besides the skills of business? What kinds of values were you taking away from that, or?
A lot of interpersonal skills development. How to recognize that not everybody is the same. Everyone has a different personality, different characteristics. Therefore, everyone has to be communicated with in a slightly different manner. And so you learned that over the years and now over the decades, you have a lot of aha moments. And FDF gave me a lot of aha moments, and it still does. Even after 38 FDFs, 39 FDFs, I can't remember now how many I've attended. I wasn't at the first one, and I missed 2013. But all the others I've been to, and every one of them is a new and learning experience.
Still, for you now.
Absolutely.
Like what types of things do you learn?
New people come into FDF. And so you have the enjoyment of learning about someone new, getting to know them. You see new material being presented in the course of the competition or at night during one of the glendia that we have, one of the dances. You'll hear some new music, or you'll see someone dancing a slightly different way, or you'll get involved in a conversation off in a corner with other dancers or other co-directors that you've known for years and years. And you're still learning. So there's always learning to be done. And if anyone leaves an FDF weekend saying that they didn't learn anything new, then I feel for them and I encourage them to come back the following year, because they will definitely learn something.
It's so interesting. What's your expertise in Greek dance? Did you grow up Greek dancing, or?
My expertise is, in several people's opinions, probably bland. Started dancing as a youngster at the age of 5 or 6, as a grandparent would pull me by the hand into the dance circle, and we'd learn and follow along. And as we got a little older, we'd get excited to join in on another line. So the first exposure to it was from family and from family events that we would have. And then taking it from there to weddings and baptisms, etc., and even beyond. Having gone to Greece as a youngster every summer for 4 months to learn to read and write Greek, because I had already learned to speak. That was my first language in the house. Not only did we get exposed to the written form of Greek, but also we were out with family in Greece, going to various festivities and learning to dance over there and seeing how they danced compared to how we danced. And so you pick up skills and you begin to develop your styles. And from there, opportunities to work with brilliant teachers and directors, both here in the US as well as from Greece, choreographers, and honing skills even more. And then as time goes on, traveling to Greece with a completely different mindset to actually go to a particular area of Greece and pay attention to what's going on, and learning and asking questions and delving deeper into a storyline of a dance or why a movement is the way it is. I said at the beginning of it that my experience is somewhat bland compared to so many others. And what I mean by that is that I may not, and I do not have the research background as so many others do, but I believe my experience over the years of having gone to Greece so many times and being immersed in the culture gives me an opportunity to interpret and to actually view and see how a presentation is being given. Is it an interpretive presentation, or is it a copying type of presentation on stage? And so I look at it from those points of view to see what is the intent of the director and the group. So I'm coming from a different angle.
Which would you rather see, interpretive or copying?
It depends on the context of what the overall event and presentation is. and what the director or the leader of the presentation, what their intent was. If their intent is, if they state it to me, to us, to the judging panel, that they are giving their version of what they believe to be an authentic style or what have you, well, that's one hat that would need to be put on. If they are telling us that this is how they do this dance in this particular area, and this is what we are going to show you, then either some of us have knowledge of that specific movement or that dance from that area, or a...
George, where were your parents from?
My mother was born in San Francisco, my father from Chicago.
And your grandparents are Greek?
Definitely Greek. Grandparents are from Tripoli in the Peloponnese, and from Kalavrita, which is the northern part of the Peloponnese.
Okay. And what are the characteristics of those two areas in terms of dance?
There aren't too many dances from those parts of Greece. They're light, they're lively, they're, for the men, they're warrior-like. If you've seen the Evzones, the changing of the guard at Constitution Square in Athens, where the guards are wearing the traditional white pleated skirt, well, the white pleated skirt is one of the traditional men's costumes from the Peloponnese. It can have different accessories to it, but it's the white fustanella. So it's simple. It is not a high degree of difficulty, if you will, but there's a lot of storytelling that the dancer, if they're well rooted in their dances, is able to convey some kind of message or story from their movement and from the song and from their work, their relationship or their interrelationship with the music and the song as it's playing out. So that's an important trait, and especially from there, the men have some dances that afford them opportunities in the lead position, in the rightmost end of the line, if you will, to do what we call figures, which are the movements of their slaps, of their scissor kicks with their legs, and their right hand slapping their feet in certain rhythms and what have you, and it's gymnastic, it's acrobatic, it's balance, it's strength, it's all of the above. Not to say that the women don't have their time in the spotlight as well. They have great opportunity to shine with their delicate movement and their storytelling abilities.
That's great. I think I saw the dancers at St. Spirit and at their festival a few weeks ago. The guys were doing a lot of that. Very gymnastic. They were like almost like the Russian dances.
Where you see the
bends
Cossack dancing, where they go down and throw their feet out.
Yeah.
We don't get quite that dramatic, but we do have our own style of that kind of showiness, and it's really an opportunity to let that lead dancer express himself or herself, to make sure that they're getting their part of the story out. And it may not be a story that connects with the audience. It's always good and important to be able to get the audience to join you, even emotionally, obviously not physically unless they ran up on stage. But if you're able to convey something and they can then appreciate what it is that you're doing and what you are saying to them. And it could be a hidden message. Nonetheless, artists, whether they're a painter, a musician, a singer, a dancer, what have you, I think there's some level where all of them can communicate. And so, dance was my opportunity to communicate.
Well, dance is definitely a very powerful way to communicate, no doubt about that. But
absolutely,
you have to understand, it seems to me Greek dance or any type of folk dance, you have to really understand the story, and the movements tell a story, right?
That's correct. The movements tell the story, but also folk dancing, just like any other folk art, whether it's Greek folk dancing or Japanese folk art or Irish folk attire or anything else, anywhere in the world, it's nature based. It has to be reflecting either the natural surroundings or what natural attributes are available for them to use, whether it's pigments for the colors, for dyeing the yarns and the fabrics, or it's the type of yarn. What's it based? Is it based out of cotton, or is it wool, or is it silk? So those are all natural things. They didn't have nylons and rayons way back in the day. They had natural products. They had mountains, they had rivers, they had valleys, they had flatlands, they had hilly lands. So they had to work amongst those natural surroundings as well. So all of that, in addition to the clothing that was worn, based on the time of year and the climate, and how hot is it or how cold is it, how snowy is it or how dry is it, the colors and the weight of the fabrics and the number of layers of clothing that were worn, that all had and has an effect or an impact on movement. It can't not. So yeah, it's a bigger story than what you just see with your eyes and watch a movement. There's a whole lot more to it than that, and it takes a long time to get it.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I'm still learning to get it.
As far as being a judge coordinator, what did you look for in a judge?
Really, there wasn't a selection process to determine whether a judge should be brought on as a judge in training or as a full-time judge, if you will. We had a significant size pool of judges to draw from. The judge coordinator's role was really just a couple of parts. One, to invite and ensure that they were the judge who was invited was on track to attend and help them or make their travel arrangements and their staying arrangements, and then to mediate the various meetings during the FDF event, before, during, and after we would have a debriefing meeting on a Monday. So it was very important for the judge coordinator to have not only the knowledge of the agenda of the weekend's events, but also what agenda was the Board of Trustees wanting the judge coordinator to impart upon the judging panel. And when I say agenda, I don't mean some kind of secret, covert thing, but is there something new that is coming down the pike that the judge panel needs to know about, so they could at least be aware of it, consider it, not in the awards or the scoring, but just to be knowledgeable of the entire movement, because they are an important part of the process. And for them to be sequestered in a judge's room after competition and only know one thing, what they just saw and heard, and score it, and not have a fuller context of the weekend, then that's doing a disservice to them and to the movement or the ministry as a whole.
Oh, that's an interesting comment. Can you tell me a little more? How are they doing a disservice to the ministry as a whole?
Well, what I mean is, if the judges were told to only judge and to not concern themselves with anything else, and to sit in their caucus room and deliberate and arrive at the awards for the non-scored portion of the competition, then what value beyond just a numeric value that they've placed on a piece of paper do they have? They need to be able to interact with dancers, with directors, with parents, with parish priests, with grandparents and aunts and uncles and all the people that attend FDF, so they can get a more well-rounded experience of FDF, not just from their own participation as a judge. And that whatever role you are in your daily life, inside and outside of FDF, the more you're exposed to things, the richer you are and the more value you offer to the entire program, whether it's a judging panel or it's a department within a company that you work for or your family. Whatever you're involved with, you're broader and you're wiser, hopefully, and you're just more well-rounded.
And you bring that to FDF. And how did FDF? You talked about the business things that you learned. I'm just curious about telling us what you do today for a living, and if FDF helped you get there.
What I do for a living now is I'm the head of sales and marketing for a farming company here in the Fresno area. What FDF helped me to accomplish was one of the earlier things that I talked about, which was understanding that everybody is different and that you have a multitude of personalities and characteristics to deal with. And as one grows older and hopefully matures, that their character and their personality can change a little over that time. And so it made me richer in that respect. I understand, I think, a little bit better where people are coming from when I'm dealing with them, because I am dealing with a lot of different people from all over the world, from China to New York to the Middle East to Central and South America, Canada, and obviously throughout the US. So there are different personalities that I'm involved with on a daily basis. That's the one major thing that it helped me in. Another one was to not procrastinate. FDF is a really interesting situation. You think you have 1 year from the Monday, the last day of an FDF, until the following year's Thursday. Oh, it's a year. No problem. I have time. Well, time flies, as they say, and that year disappears. And if you're not in the mode of planning, of being organized, of following some kind of project management type of scenario, you're not going to make it to the finish line. You're going to find yourself still on the freeway getting to FDF and trying to figure things out. So for me, I had to throw away the procrastination style of living when I was young, and as I got into my 30s and 40s and then to those other numbers, I learned that procrastination does not work. I work well under pressure.
Yeah, I like this.
So yeah, the procrastination part of it, no, I had to get ready for meetings at work. I had to have an agenda that made sense. I had to be able to present or call upon people to prepare and present. So it taught me those outlines and those modifications to outlines, even at the last minute, how to deal with it and move forward and be successful.
About the fellowship of FDF, since you've been in it from a very early age, I'm sure you have longtime friends from FDF.
From day one, they're too numerous to count. And if we don't see each other but once a year, we just pick up where we left off and we keep moving forward. I met my wife at FDF. didn't even know she was going to be my wife when I first met her, obviously, but it was a funny story, actually. We were at one of the hotels, and I believe a bunch of us were waiting in a lobby to get onto an elevator, and my eventual mother-in-law called out the name of her son-in-law. At the time, my wife has a sister who's married, and she called out his name. No one thought anything of it, that we don't have the same name. And then I believe it was a tap on the shoulder, turning around, and she thought I was her son-in-law, Bill. I said, no, my name is George, and a couple of years later, my wife and I were married. Not because of that one incident, but those little turns and twists in life, and who is this person? Well, ends up being my mother-in-law. Whose name is she calling out? Well, that's my future wife's sister's husband. How do things like that happen? So I met my wife there. Our kids went through FDF. Our friends and relatives' kids have come through FDF. Our friends themselves were dancers or in leadership positions in FDF from way back in the beginning. I run into friends all the time, and now with technologies like Facebook, where we can't physically be in two places at the same time or be away from home and work every day because we have to be either at home or at work, we connect there or reconnect. And those are relationships that are deeper than friendships that we may even form at work or at school. We may have a few very close friends at work or at school. But something about FDF, because we all had a common thread, have a common thread. Threads, I should say, plural. We're all Greek Orthodox. Most all of us, not all, but most, are of Greek descent. We may or may not speak Greek. We may or may not be able to read and write Greek, but we can dance, we can sing, or we can play an instrument. And we have a love of all of the above. And we understand each other. It was funny in the early days of my marriage with Mia, people would say, well, does your church require you to marry Greek? I said, no, it's not the church that requires. It was partly my requirement, because who other than a Greek woman would get a Greek guy? Understand, in other words. So, it was one of those things. That might be a little too far-fetched or stretching it a bit. But there is a sense of pride, and the fact that both Mia and I are, quote-unquote, full-blooded Greeks and married and have 3 kids that are full-blooded Greek. We're not in a contest to see who can go the most generations of being full-blooded Greek. That's not it at all. We just have an appreciation for it. We value it. And if our kids, when they grow up and it's time for them to meet and marry, whether they marry Greek or not, or Orthodox or not, that's not mine and Mia's, priorities nor our concern or our desire, because that's a completely different discussion. Mm-hmm. If they do marry Greek, terrific. If they don't, terrific. As long as they're healthy and happy, that's the primary.
That's wonderful. That you have that attitude, because I thought you were going to say, as long as they marry Greek.
Had I been from maybe 2 or 3 generations back, probably right, from my parents' generations or grandparents' generation, then I would probably be in that mindset. Mm-hmm. But I'm not in that mindset. I can't be closed-minded to that, because there's there's value and richness all throughout the world. My daughter is engaged to be married. She'll be married next year, and she's marrying a young man who is not Greek, but he has fallen in love with so many things Greek. To get up and try some of the dances, to get into the foods and the drink and the songs and the sounds and sights. And so it's, what difference does it make? I know people here in Fresno and have known people in San Jose and so many other places who are not Greek, but are more Greek in other ways than Greeks are. So what does being Greek? It's more like the Hellenistic ideal as opposed to the Greek ethnicity or nationality. So it begins to go, I think, to that extent. Greek is one thing, and Hellenism is something completely different. And I think there's a bridge between the two that a lot of people realize that it exists and that they can cross from the one bank to the other using that bridge and go back and forth and be comfortable with that.
Can you sum up the difference in a few sentences?
Well, not unlike so many other nationalities or ethnic groups, Greeks are very hospitable. They will invite you into the home on an afternoon and ask you if you'd like something to drink or have something to eat. And the mistake that the visitor, the guest makes is saying no, because you will drink, you will eat, and it's not a snack. So many people exaggerate, and I've seen some pictures on Facebook that show, come in for a snack, and it shows someone on like a 20-foot barbecue grill grilling up, 100 pounds of meat just for a snack. Well, that's an exaggeration, but it's that hospitality, but I don't even want to use that word. It's just that thing that we have, as like I said, so many others have, where you welcome people into your home, but it's not just the four walls and the roof and the floor. It's your home, it's your life, and you want to share it with them. You're not showing off, you're not boasting or bragging, you are sharing it, because that's what you're supposed to do. In the old country, in the smallest villages during the hardest of times, travelers from one village in Greece to another village in Greece may stop along the road, and there may be a villager there who hands them, some bread. And they may only have a small loaf of bread, but they're going to give that bread to that traveler. And we were all raised with grandparents that in the home, or I should say a lot of us, who shared stories of difficult times in the late 1800s, early 1900s in Greece. And then when they immigrated to the US, and hearing their stories. And so there is a deeper sense of obligation to them that we live up to what they did in their life that we ended up coming into. So when I'm teaching a class somewhere, I usually close the class with, and I share these dances and these stories and these things about costume, not because I want to show it off, but because I have an obligation to my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents who did and went through whatever they went through, good and bad, but they did, period. I owe it to them as much as I owe it to my kids so they can pick up on it and they can carry it forward. What good is it to have anything, whether it's a story or $1 billion or anything in between, and not share it? How can you not share it? It has no value if you kept it to yourself. And that's one of the things that I think is Hellenistic. It's not just Greek, it's Hellenistic. There are people that understand that Hellenism, that thing called Hellenism exists. So they are not Greek, but they believe in the ideal of Hellenism, and therefore there is that bridge that they can walk across and go back and forth. They may not be able to show the hospitality of the Greek style, but they may learn to show the hospitality of their particular style. And if that makes them happy, and if it gives their guests comfort and happiness, then they've accomplished something, and I think that's where that bridge happened.
Right. I can see that in different cultures where it's similar but different, the way it's carried out. If FDF, this is a tough question. If it hadn't happened, I'm trying to get at what are the factors that you think brought it together? I know Peter was instrumental in starting it, and as were others. But do you think it was time for something like that? It's just affected so many people. I just wonder what made it start and grow like wildfire, which it seemed to do.
That's a great question. It may have been it was a confluence of a lot of different things happening. We're coming out of the 60s and into the 70s here in this country. Vietnam was just ending or had just ended. A lot of kids growing up in the 60s and in the early 70s felt like they only had their identity within their home or within their family, because so many things, although they seemed to be free out in daily life, there was a lot of introspection, or I should say even people needing to protect themselves. They didn't know what was coming next. A completely different generation out of the 60s and 70s. And prior to that, I don't recall being with my Greek friends, whether at school or at church or just at their house, speaking Greek out in public. Just like a lot of other groups, you didn't see a lot of ethnic groups around, and if you did, a lot of them were either speaking some kind of English or not really speaking at all. They were just kind of going about their business. Now in the big cities where you have dense populations, New York, Boston, Toronto, Chicago, etc., that's a different story. San Jose in those days was only a couple 100,000 people. It was a late farming town that was coming to its own with Silicon Valley. Now it's a completely different genre. But we started coming out, and this man by the name of Peter Priovalis and a couple of young kids from San Diego with him, George Scarvelis and Madeline Rogopoulos and Marilyn Chromitis, and I don't recall who else may have traveled with them on that one night to San Jose and sat down and talked to us about FDF. And okay, you mean with some other Greek kids? And we weren't too familiar. We knew some kids at some of the other parishes nearby, but we just didn't break out of our communities. Well, those walls were shattered instantly. The first FDF I remember we attended, we made friends at that very first one at San Diego, and to this day, when we see each other, it's more like brothers and sisters. I remember we used to fly down from San Jose to San Diego on a Friday after work, meet up with them. We'd go to Del Coronado Hotel, on the beach, and do bonfires and what have you on a Saturday night, and maybe we could remember on a Sunday afternoon what happened on Saturday night, maybe not. And then for some reason on a Monday morning, we're supposed to be at work and we're still in San Diego and we're calling offices and telling them our flights were delayed or canceled and coming up with excuses because we could not tear ourselves apart. We were so close, so fast.
Who were some of your contemporaries who did you dance? Who did you start dancing with? Some of the names of the people.
In San Jose, in my dance group, for example.
Right.
Stella and Carrie Padarakis, Christy New, Tom Tsagalakis, Mark and Evan and Penelope Isakopoulos, Jeff Contos, and Angie Correttis, and the Stouris girls, Tula and you're going to have to edit this part until I come up with her name. Why can I not remember her name? Tasia and Tula Stouris.
And friends from other places?
And friends from Gary Wallner and George Evstathiou and Ethan Nicolaou and, oh my God, Sia Johannes and Natalie and Sandra Materis and Elaine and Dimitra Paparis. And, you know, down in San Diego, there were the Angeles kids. There was Marilyn Chromitis and Madeline Regopoulos and George Scarvelis and George Fahouris and Thene Daenerys and Christine and Maria Trompas and on and on. I mean, it just, the list was formed 38, 39 years ago. And
a lot of names.
And there's so many more. And to not mention them, it's not because I don't want to. It's that, you know, in my advanced years, I can only remember and retain so much.
There are the Academy Awards.
Exactly.
I'd like to thank everyone, but yes, we can break.
Continuing on with names, I would be remiss to not mention my Fresno family people. Obviously, Mia and Steve Lebrit and George Pappas and Therese Chimes and Gina Nicolaou and Gary Nicolaou and Athena Salazar and Athena Costis and Chrissy Gaidi and David and Terry Petropoulos. And so in those early days, it was really 4 communities, dance groups that gelled. San Diego, Fresno, San Jose, and Castro Valley. Those 4 gelled and formed bonds from the very beginning. And from there, not that we parented the rest, but we were able to share with any newcomer what we experienced at the first and the previous FDFs. And they saw it and they got it and they felt it. And it just went on from there. But we can look back at it and say, yeah, but we were the first ones to do it. So anything you're doing now, enjoy it, but we were there, we did it first, and we had the first reunions. After FDF, we would have a reunion in one of the hosting cities. We'd fly, we'd drive, we'd what have you. We'd get there and we'd have a 3-day reunion. And it really was a family reunion.
Wow. Are you aware of are you at all involved with or mentoring any of the groups elsewhere in the country? Like Eris, for example, is in Virginia.
Right, Eris Yortsidis.
Mm-hmm.
No, as far as other parts of the country, no.
Okay.
I am involved with the local groups here in Fresno to some extent. I can't get too involved with them because as a judge, I have to maintain some distance.
Right.
But there's a period of time during the year where I can be called upon to, you know, impart whatever information or what have you. But I am involved in other areas, like at St. Nicholas Ranch and Retreat Center. They run an elder hostel program. And people from all over the U.S., senior citizens, attend these elder hostels. And the one at St. Nicholas is all about Greek. Greek food, the Orthodox religion, and Greek ancient history, and music and costume and dance, etc. So I go up to the ranch and I do a nightly session on Greek folk costume, music, and dance. Not only showing them, but also teaching them some basic dances. So I'm still involved in that respect.
I saw something about that online. It looks like a lot of fun.
It is. You get a great variety of retired people, from engineers to teachers to doctors to lawyers to stay-at-home mom housewives who are now retired housewives because their kids have grown up and they've flown the coop. And they are all so genuine and sincere in their interest of the material that you're presenting. And I learn from them too. A lot of them are musicians, maybe music teachers, and they'll discuss after the presentation different rhythms that they heard in some of the music and tried to correlate it to whatever type of music that they may have learned or taught. And so that we have interesting conversations off to the side about things like that, or dance. Why movement? Why did I show a certain movement as I did, and what did it mean? And they said, "Oh, well, in this part of the Balkans, maybe from Romania, or from Albania, or from Bulgaria, something like this is done," and so they find similarities, and we can talk about that. St. Nicholas Ranch and the Elder Hostel is a fun program.
Well, I could ask you a million more questions, but I don't want to make you go on. Is there something, I'm sure there is, but that you would like to say? As Peter explained, he wants to start this rather extensive website, not only with these interviews, but with archival materials and more about music. I think he'd really like to gather a lot of research that's already been done and put it on this website in kind of a searchable database. So I think eventually a lot of people will see your interview as well as our documentary, hopefully. Is there anything about FDF overall that you would like to communicate to people?
Well, I believe God planted a seed in the Priovalis family's mind and allowed for Bishop Meletios of blessed memory to give it his blessing, and Father Sam Poulos of blessed memory, and Anna F. Stathiou of blessed memory, people from the very beginning of this thing who saw something. They didn't know what they saw, but I believe they saw something. And here we are now, 39, 40 years later, still being FDF. And those that have not participated in it have lost out. Those who are thinking about participating in it, stop thinking about it. Just do it. Do it once, at least. This website that is being put together that's going to house so much research information and other words of wisdom, etc. It's about time. I know good things take time. It's going to be one of the legacies that the starting generation of FDF is going to leave to the future generations. And other than being a parent, there aren't too many other things in my life personally that I'm very proud of than to be a participant of this thing called FDF. we've had a lot of people come and go in FDF. Too numerous to mention, unfortunately. And if it wasn't for FDF, those who came and went, I don't think would have been as well known and loved. Not known in the popularity sense of being on the cover of, GQ, but known as the persons that they were and what they contributed to the rest of us. And if FDF didn't exist for us back since 1975, I don't know what we would have had, what we would have done, where we would be today. So we are better for it. And anyone who comes up from behind us to appreciate FDF will say the same thing 40 years down their road.